What if the Byzantine Empire had retaken Western Europe? If the Romans had returned, not merely as an idea, but in force, with iron and flame, to reclaim the lands they once ruled, would the Latin West have bent the knee or burned? History remembers the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE as a quiet catastrophe. No epic battle, no last emperor dying on a battlefield. Instead, the Western throne was simply vacated, surrendered to warlords and kings who carved the carcass of an empire into kingdoms that would shape medieval Europe. But in the East, in Constantinople, the empire did not die. It survived. It transformed. It became the Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome's legacy, defender of Christendom, and guardian of an ancient idea that Rome, united, could still live again. By the 6th century, that dream had a name: Justinian. I ruled not just with ambition, but with obsession. From 527 to 565 CE, he launched wars to reclaim the lost provinces of the West. His armies, led by the legendary general Belisarius, swept through North Africa, stormed Italy, and marched into southern Spain. For a fleeting moment, the Mediterranean shimmered with Roman sails once more. But then, it unraveled. Plague decimated the population. Enemies at every frontier rose like hydras. And when Justinian died, the dream of a reunified Roman world seemed buried with him. But what if it wasn't? Let us turn the page, not of what was, but of what could have been. Imagine this. It is 554 CE. The Gothic War has ended not in stalemate, but in utter Byzantine triumph. The Ostrogoths are crushed, not merely driven back, but eradicated. Italy does not bleed for decades more, but stabilizes under Roman law. And more crucially, Justinian lives not until 565, but until 578. Longer life, fewer setbacks, and a bolder vision. With the Western territories pacified and the plague contained by aggressive quarantines along military supply routes, the empire consolidates its gains. Belisarius is not dismissed, not sidelined by jealous courtiers. He is elevated, supreme strategos of the West. Under his command, the legions reform, combining classical discipline with lessons learned from centuries of war against Huns, Vandals, and Persians. By 560 CE, Hispania becomes the next objective. The Visigothic kingdom, fractured by internal disputes and vulnerable from the south, becomes a ripe target. The Roman fleet, rebuilt in Carthage and Ravenna, launches a coordinated amphibious assault on the Iberian coast, while land forces cross the Pyrenees from Gaul, aided by pro-Roman Frankish nobles disillusioned with their Merovingian overlords. This is not conquest, it is reclamation. And it works. By 567 CE, a great triumph is held in Constantinople. Emissaries from every corner of the Mediterranean pay tribute not to the Byzantine emperor, but to the Roman emperor. The Senate is restored in Rome, not as a relic, but as a governing body under imperial oversight. Latin is revived in administration. Law codes are standardized under the Corpus Juris Civilis. A new hybrid world is forming, yet shadows stir. To the north, the Franks view the Roman resurgence with dread. The Avars encroach upon the Balkans, and Persia, always watching, prepares for war. But for now, in this alternate history, the Roman eagle flies again across 2 continents. And as dusk falls over Constantinople, Justinian gazes west, not as a man remembering lost glory, but as an emperor who reclaimed it. But what happens when an empire regains its strength, yet must confront a world no longer built for its old ways? The year is 568 CE. The Western Mediterranean is no longer a fractured tapestry of feudal lords and barbarian kings. It is a Roman lake once more. Carthage gleams with marble colonnades. Ravenna hums with new bureaucrats drafting imperial edicts. In Hispania, Roman aqueducts flow again. Roads are repaired, taxation returns, not as extortion, but as structure. And with the restoration of order comes something even more powerful than legions: legitimacy. Justinian, now in his 80s, becomes less a man and more a symbol, a living Augustus, draped in both imperial purple and divine sanction. In this timeline, his greatest achievement isn't merely military conquest, it is ideological resurrection. To the east, the Byzantine Church had grown distinct, Greek in language, Eastern in ritual. But the West remembers Rome. And Justinian understands the unifying power of faith. He does not impose, but reconciles. He summons bishops from Alexandria, Antioch, Carthage, Milan, and Rome to a grand council in Constantinople. Here, a new vision of Christianity emerges, not a schism, but a synthesis. The resulting doctrine becomes known as the Symphonia, a carefully balanced harmony between church and state. The Pope in Rome retains spiritual primacy in the West, while the Patriarch in Constantinople governs the East. The Emperor stands as Pontifex Maximus in both spheres, protector, not dictator of doctrine. It is an uneasy arrangement, but a brilliant one. And so, the cross and the eagle march in unison. But peace is never permanent. Beyond the Danube, the Avars and Slavs grow restless. In Gaul, the Merovingian Franks, led by the fierce king Chilperic the Furic, regard the Roman return as an existential threat. And in Persia, the Sasanian Shahanshah, Khosrow Fis, sees his window closing. To secure the empire, Justinian must act not only with force, but foresight. A sweeping reform is initiated. The themes, military districts governed by strategoi, are established across the West, modeled after the system already forming in Anatolia. This innovation blurs the line between civil and military authority, but grants local stability and rapid response to frontier incursions. Crucially, local populations are included in recruitment. Romans in Gaul, Hispano-Romans, North African Berbers, all wear the imperial seal. For the first time in generations, the empire does not merely occupy, it integrates. The elite tagmata are restructured into a mobile, professional force stationed strategically across major cities: Carthage, Mediolanum, Toulouse, and Massilia. These are no longer remnants of an ancient army. They are the vanguard of a reborn civilization. Diplomatically, Justinian plays a subtler game. He dispatches envoys to the Frankish court, offering marriage alliances and mutual recognition of borders. He funds monasteries in Germania, offering Christian learning to tribal chieftains. Slowly, methodically, he poisons the roots of Frankish unity with promises of Roman favor. The Merovingians begin to fracture, some drawn toward Rome, others doubling down on independence. In 570, an audacious plan unfolds. The Eastern Front is quieted with a diplomatic marriage to a Persian princess. Shocking, but effective. With the East stabilized, Justinian directs his gaze to the north, Gaul. The campaign is not one of invasion, but of co-option. Roman-backed Frankish nobles rise up. The imperial standard appears not as a conqueror, but a liberator. When Belisarius, still serving at nearly 70, enters Lutetia, he does so not with bloodshed, but with acclamation. The Franks are not destroyed. They are absorbed. But empires, by nature, awaken opposition. And now, a new threat rises, not from within Europe, but from a desert to the south. In 571, word reaches Constantinople of a charismatic preacher, uniting the Arab tribes in the Hijaz. His message is simple, monotheistic, and fervent. His name? Muhammad. The empire has barely healed, yet the next great upheaval in human history is already stirring beyond the horizon. The question is no longer whether Rome can return, but whether it can endure what comes next. By 575 CE, the Mediterranean world gleams under imperial unity. The West is no longer a shattered shell of Roman memory. It pulses with the lifeblood of a civilization reborn. From Londinium to Carthago Nova, from Ravenna to Antioch, the roads are patrolled, taxes are collected, the law is codified. The empire, once split between East and West, is whole again, restored not in name, but in function. But far to the southeast, beyond the well-charted lands of imperial influence, The wind is shifting. In the desolate sands of the Arabian Peninsula, tribes that once knew only blood feud and caravan raiding now gather under a singular banner, not one of empire, but of revelation. In 571 CE, a man named Muhammad is born in Mecca. As the Byzantine Empire fortifies its grip on the West, Muhammad's message of monotheism, moral reform, and divine unity spreads like wildfire across the desert. In our real timeline, this would take decades to crystallize. But in this alternate history, where the Byzantines have established tighter control over the Near East and an emboldened frontier presence, their reaction is more immediate and more intrusive. By 610 CE, as Muhammad begins his public preaching, the empire is already watching. Imperial agents, part bureaucrat, part theologian, are dispatched to Arabia not with swords, but with parchment and gold. Their mission? Negotiate, contain, and if necessary, convert. But Muhammad's message is not one to be silenced by coin or by creed. It is unyielding, uncompromising, and it is resonating. Unlike the pagan tribes the Byzantines have manipulated for centuries, this movement is not fractured or mercenary. It is revolutionary. Still, the Roman Empire is no stranger to revolutions. In 615 CE, Belisarius has passed away. His funeral in Constantinople draws mourners from across the empire, a living testament to his legendary campaigns. In his place rises a new generation of commanders trained in both Roman tradition and frontier innovation. Chief among them, Strategos Germanus of Antioch, a sharp mind forged in the eastern deserts and fluent in Arabic. Germanus is tasked with what the court deems a proactive engagement, but instead of outright invasion, he chooses diplomacy fused with psychological pressure. He travels to Yathrib, later to be called Medina, and meets directly with Muhammad. Their exchange is recorded by later chroniclers in both Christian and Islamic texts, colored by theology and myth. Some accounts say Germanus offered protection and recognition in exchange for Muhammad's allegiance to the empire. Others claim he threatened annihilation. Regardless, Muhammad refused compromise, and so the empire prepared for war. But war does not come immediately. In this timeline, the Arab tribes do not sweep across Byzantine Syria in a tide of sudden conquest. The empire, fortified, responsive, and more unified than ever before, holds its ground. Garrison cities in Palestine and Mesopotamia are reinforced, roads are blocked, water sources are guarded. The Muslim conquests so successful in our history falter at the edge of imperial preparedness. Yet with resistance comes transformation. Islam does not collapse under pressure. It adapts. Muhammad, forced to delay his advance northward, turns his energy inward, consolidating Arabia, reforming tribal governance, and developing a system of administration inspired in part by Roman organization. The Caliphate, when it does emerge after Muhammad's death in 632, is more centralized, more patient, more politically astute. Meanwhile, back in Constantinople, Justinian is long dead. His successor, Emperor Tiberius II, rules with less vision, but solid stewardship. The empire does not splinter as it once did. The Senate in Rome, restored in structure, if not in power, continues to debate imperial edicts. In Gaul, Romanized Franks are now generals and governors. In Hispania, Latin is taught in schools alongside Greek, while Berber auxiliary troops patrol the southern borders. Yet under the glittering surface, old cracks stir. The Western aristocracy, resentful of Constantinople's central control, begins to whisper. The Church, though unified in doctrine, faces internal strain as Latin bishops push back against Eastern hierarchy. And in Alexandria, theological disputes once buried by compromise reignite with regional fervor. And in the south, across the Arabian frontier, a new caliph, Abu Bakr, has forged alliances not with kings, but with belief. The empire had retaken the West, but in doing so, had it overreached? A new confrontation is coming, not between two empires, but between two worldviews. Rome reborn and Islam ascending. It is 634 CE, And for the first time in nearly a century, the Roman Empire stands on the defensive, not against barbarians or Persians, but against an idea. The Caliphate, forged in the harsh crucible of Arabia, is now an organized force. The tribes are no longer fragmented raiders. They are unified under the banner of Islam, carrying not only swords, but a belief in divine destiny. The prophet is gone, but his successors carry his vision outward with strategic clarity. In our history, the Byzantine Empire reeled from religious disunity and economic exhaustion. In this alternate path, the empire is stronger, more centralized, more militarized, more recently renewed by its victories in the West. But even so, it is not invulnerable. Empires do not collapse only when they are weak. They falter when they underestimate what they do not understand. Caliph Abu Bakr launches the Ridda campaigns across Arabia with ruthless precision, solidifying his control. Then, instead of striking north blindly, he waits. He gathers intelligence. He studies the Roman theme system. He learns which cities are fortified and which are neglected. And when he strikes in 636, it is not at Antioch or Damascus. It is at Petra and Bosra in the deep desert, bypassing the Roman road network entirely. The Battle of Yarmouk still occurs, but with a crucial difference. In this timeline, Emperor Heraclius is not overextended and demoralized. His legions are trained, fed, and led by competent officers. The Roman frontier has been restructured. When Khalid ibn al-Walid marches into Syria, he meets not a scattered, crumbling army, but a series of coordinated defenses, bolstered by local militias loyal to the empire, not out of love, but because the Roman system has brought them stability after centuries of chaos. Yarmouk becomes a stalemate. Neither side wins decisively. Casualties are high. Khalid retreats not in shame, but to regroup. The Muslims do not abandon their vision of expansion, but they are forced to adapt. The Caliphate shifts its strategy. Instead of direct confrontation, it turns to the periphery. Egypt, always the empire's breadbasket, becomes the next target. But here, too, the Byzantines are ready. The fortified city of Alexandria, already a tinderbox of theological tension, becomes a focal point of both diplomacy and resistance. Imperial agents attempt to exploit old grievances. Miaphysite Christians discontent with Constantinople's religious orthodoxy. But the empire, learning from its own history, chooses tolerance over repression. The Edict of Symphonia is reaffirmed, granting regional churches autonomy in doctrine so long as loyalty to the emperor remains intact. It's a gamble, and it pays off. When Muslim forces arrive in 641 under the command of Amr ibn al-As, they find an Egypt more united than in our timeline. Instead of an oppressed population willing to switch overlords, they meet Roman legions backed by civilian volunteers, even Coptic Christians, who view Rome, however distant, as the lesser disruption. Alexandria holds. The Muslim advance is halted again. And yet, the Caliphate does not fade. It turns eastward, conquering Persia, whose Sassanid empire is far more brittle than the Romans. Zoroastrianism collapses under the weight of internal decay and external assault. Within a decade, the heartlands of Persia are Islamic. And now, the Caliphate is no longer merely Arabian. It is Persian Arab, a synthesis of administration, science, and theology that gives it unexpected endurance. Back in Constantinople, the court breathes, just barely. The empire has held its ground, but the cost is mounting. Armies must be rotated constantly. The western provinces grumble under new taxes imposed to fund eastern campaigns. In Rome, senators whisper about local autonomy. In Hispania, Berber garrisons grow uneasy. Many of their kin trade with Muslim merchants, sharing not just goods but ideas. The empire, once emboldened by conquest, now teeters on the edge of perpetual war. And yet, beneath the surface of geopolitical tension, a deeper question begins to emerge. Which civilization will define the soul of the next millennium? On one side, a reborn Roman Empire, technocratic, pluralistic, but stretched thin. On the other, an Islamic caliphate, ideologically unified, culturally dynamic, and expanding fast. In 650 CE, the Mediterranean is no longer a Roman lake. It is a fault line, and as the empires stare at each other across it, both prepare for what they know is inevitable. The next great clash, not just of armies, but of civilizations. The year is 660 CE. While the eastern frontier holds firm beneath the constant threat of the caliphate's expansion, it is not the sands of Syria or the Nile Delta that first shake the empire's foundations. It is the marble of Rome. For over a century now, the western provinces have lived under imperial restoration. Roads rebuilt, courts re-established. A generation raised with memories not of Gothic kings or Vandal raids, but of Roman governors, Latin schooling, and the emperor's seal on every tax and law. Yet no restoration is ever complete. The West had changed during its centuries of fragmentation, deeply, irrevocably. And now, under pressure, those changes begin to surface. It begins in Gaul. There, Romanized Frankish elites, many now decades removed from their tribal roots, begin to assert a new identity, not as subjects, but as stewards. They no longer see themselves merely as governors executing policy from Constantinople, but as heirs to a Roman tradition localized and adapted. They raise questions in the restored Senate of Rome. Why must tax revenues flow eastward to defend distant lands and imperial priorities that rarely benefit the West? Why must Roman soldiers die in Syria to protect provinces they will never see? The answers come too slowly. Constantinople, consumed by its duel with the Caliphate and the rise of a new Muslim navy threatening Cyprus and the Aegean, fails to grasp the urgency. By the time Emperor Constans II dispatches envoys to Lutetia and Massilia, the damage is done. A coalition of Gallic Roman senators, bishops, and generals draft a charter of administrative autonomy, still loyal to the empire, still under the emperor's divine authority, but effectively independent in taxation, recruitment, and law. They call it the Concordia Gallica. Rome hesitates. Some in the Senate argue for compromise, others for force. Constans chooses a third path, symbolism. In 663, he travels west, the first emperor to set foot in Italy in over a century. He visits Rome not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim. He walks the ancient Forum. He gives speeches in Latin, he prays at St. Peter's tomb, and in a dazzling public ceremony, he recrowns the Pope with his own hands, reaffirming the unity of church and empire. It works, for a moment. The people cheer, the senators applaud. The Pope proclaims divine harmony between East and West. But then Constans does something unexpected. He orders imperial troops to garrison key cities in southern Italy, Naples, Capua, Tarentum, not against Muslims, but against potential Gallic uprisings. The message is clear. Unity, yes, but under obedience. The illusion of equality shatters. In Hispania, unrest stirs. Roman Berber commanders, once fiercely loyal, begin questioning their place in an empire that seems increasingly obsessed with symbolism over pragmatism. In Britannia, semi-autonomous bishoprics drift further from the Roman sphere, aligning more with Irish monasticism than with Constantinople's orthodoxy. And in Carthage, a darker storm gathers. The Muslim Caliphate, now under the Umayyads, has turned westward. With Egypt lost in our real history by 641 and Sun, the caliphs had an open door into North Africa. In this timeline, that door is still shut. Alexandria stands, but the cracks are forming further west. Berber tribes in Mauritania begin converting to Islam, drawn not by force but by trade, marriage, and the shared rejection of Eastern imperial arrogance. In 670, Arab fleets begin raiding Sicily. In response, the empire fortifies its Mediterranean fleet, establishing a permanent naval base in Syracuse. For the first time in generations, the Roman navy becomes a true power again. Sleek dromons with Greek fire, capable of striking fast and vanishing like phantoms. But the strategy is reactive, not proactive. And in the meantime, cracks widen into fractures. By 675, The Concordia Gallica has evolved into a formal Western League. Still nominally loyal, its members now hold independent councils. They draft legal codes that blend Roman law with Germanic custom. They mint local coinage bearing both the imperial eagle and the regional sigil of the province. In Constantinople, the court is outraged, but it is paralyzed, for every move against the West threatens to drain resources from the eastern frontier, where the caliphate is growing bolder, more coordinated. A two-front crisis looms, and within the empire's own borders, the question no one dares ask begins to whisper, what does it mean to be Roman, when Rome itself begins to drift away? The eagle still soars, but how long can it fly without tearing apart its own wings? The year is 680 BCE. The Roman Empire, once reborn in brilliance under Justinian, now resembles an aging colossus, mighty still, but groaning beneath its own weight. Its shadow stretches across two continents, from the Atlantic shores of Lusitania to the fortified deserts of Mesopotamia. But beneath that shadow, the foundations begin to shift. The Western League, a confederation of semi-autonomous Roman provinces in Gaul, Hispania, and parts of Italia, continues to grow bolder. Originally conceived as a cooperative body within the empire, it has begun acting like a state of its own. It dispatches ambassadors. It negotiates trade deals independently. It forms military councils, first for local defense, then for strategic planning, without Constantinople's sanction. Emperor Constantine IV, reigning from the opulent halls of the Great Palace, sees this for what it is, a quiet secession. But unlike past rebellions, this is not fueled by barbarian warlords or religious heretics. It is carried out by men in togas, in marble halls, beneath busts of Caesar and Cicero. It is rebellion cloaked in Roman dignity, and it is deeply dangerous. In response, Constantine proposes a council of unity to be held in Rome, meant to reconcile East and West, reassert imperial sovereignty, and heal the growing fracture. Bishops from across the Christian world are invited. Senators, generals, even envoys from the Eastern Patriarchates and the Pope attend. For a brief moment, the world watches and wonders, could the empire heal itself, not with war, but with words? But diplomacy, like empires, depends on balance, and the scales tip quickly. At the council's climax, Constantine demands the reaffirmation of Eastern primacy, not only of Constantinople's authority, but of its theology, its taxation rights, and its veto power over all Western legislation. He invokes tradition, law, divine order. The Western delegates walk out. Within weeks, Rome descends into silent chaos. Senators flee. Bishops clash. Riots erupt in Ravenna and Massilia. The Pope, caught between loyalty to the emperor and pressure from local nobility, issues a carefully worded decree recognizing the enduring spiritual unity of Christendom, while omitting any mention of imperial obedience. It is a schism, not of faith, but of sovereignty. While the East flounders diplomatically, the caliphate surges. In 682, a powerful Arab-Berber alliance invades the western edges of Mauritania. The imperial presence in Carthage, underfunded and isolated, collapses within a year. The gateway to North Africa opens like a wound. Berber tribes across the Maghreb convert to Islam in droves, not under the sword, but under promise. Promise of self-rule, of freedom from Roman tax collectors, of divine favor from a rising civilization. The Muslim fleet, previously scattered and slow, is now organized. It learns from Roman naval design, incorporating fire-resistant hulls and double-tiered oars. In 685, they sack Syracuse in a sudden raid that leaves half the imperial fleet burning in the harbor. Rome's Mediterranean dominance, the very lifeline of its unity, is slipping. And yet, in the east, the empire refuses to break. Constantinople, behind its triple Theodosian walls, prepares for what it knows is coming. The city is no longer merely a capital. It is the core of Roman identity, the last bastion of imperial will. Engineers develop new formulas of Greek fire, deadlier, more stable. Armenian generals train elite tagmata units. Anatolia is divided into tighter themes, its population militarized. It is here, not in the West, where the empire's soul hardens into steel. But in the West, something else is happening. Something more insidious. The Western League, realizing its de facto independence, begins forging its own ideology. A neo-Romanism takes shape. A belief that the true Roman spirit now resides not in Constantinople, with its Greek-speaking clergy and bureaucratic rigidity, but in the Latin-speaking provinces that carried the torch through the centuries of chaos. They claim to be the heirs of Julius Caesar, not Justinian. In Gaul, new civic buildings bear dual standards, the Eagle of Rome and a golden fleur-de-lis, symbolizing Gallic Roman pride. In Hispania, Roman courts begin using vernacular dialects alongside Latin, sowing the seeds of future Romance languages. It is evolution, wrapped in tradition. By 690 CE, two Romes exist. One speaks Greek, prays toward the east, and guards the Bosphorus with fire. The other speaks Latin, invokes Caesar, and prepares for a world where it no longer needs to look east at all. The empire is not yet dead, but its body is dividing. And the world is watching. By 700 CE, the dream of a unified Roman Empire, a single world straddling east and west, bound by law, faith, and memory, is all but shattered. What remains is a ghost made of stone and ceremony. In the east, Constantinople still claims to be the eternal capital, heir to Augustus, Constantine, and Justinian. Its court gleams with gold, its bureaucracy ticks like a machine, its armies defend the line against the Islamic Caliphate. But in the West, a different rhythm beats. The Western League has transformed. What began as administrative autonomy has hardened into political independence. In 698 CE, at a gathering in Lugdunum, the leaders of Gaul, Hispania, and portions of Italia proclaimed the Res Publica Occidentalis, the Western Roman Republic, not a restoration of the ancient Senate, nor a carbon copy of Byzantium, but a hybrid entity, Latin in tongue, militarized, and increasingly decentralized. It rejects imperial titles, but cloaks itself in Roman symbolism. Fasces, eagles, the SPQR emblem revived and chiseled into public buildings from Tarraco to Lutetia. The Pope, ever cautious, does not endorse the Republic, but he does not condemn it either. In the East, Constantine IV's son, Justinian II, ascends the throne with fire in his blood and vengeance in his eyes. To him, the Western secession is not political misalignment. It is heresy, rebellion, sacrilege. He dispatches emissaries to the Pope demanding condemnation. The Vatican remains silent, so Justinian prepares for war. But war is already at the gates, from the south. The Umayyad Caliphate, energized by the conquest of North Africa and emboldened by naval superiority, launches its boldest campaign yet, the Siege of Carthage. This jewel of the western provinces had once been a symbol of Justinian's triumph. Now, it becomes a symbol of his successor's failure. The Muslim fleet, operating out of fortified North African harbors, isolates the city and cuts its supply lines. Despite a heroic defense by remaining imperial forces, Carthage falls in 698. The crescent rises where once the eagle flew. It is a moment of geopolitical transformation. The Muslim world now controls not just Arabia, Syria, and Egypt, but the entirety of the southern Mediterranean coast. With the fall of Carthage, the Caliphate gains access to the Atlantic, and with it, the potential to pressure both Byzantium and the Western Republic from a new angle. For the first time since Rome ruled from Britannia to Judea, the Mediterranean is truly divided, and yet, even as imperial prestige suffers loss after loss, Constantinople itself refuses to fall. When the Arabs launch their first siege in 674 to 678, they are met by a nightmare born of Roman ingenuity, Greek fire. Blazing like liquid dragon's breath across the waters of the Bosphorus, it sets entire fleets aflame. The city stands, battered but unbroken. Justinian II, bloodied by failures in Africa and Italy, doubles down. He tightens control over the Anatolian themes, forcibly relocates Slavic tribes into imperial heartlands to dilute rebellious ethnic blocs, and cracks down on dissent in the capital. His rule becomes erratic: draconian decrees, mass imprisonments, rumors of secret police. In 695, the Senate in Constantinople revolts and deposes him. He is exiled, mutilated, his nose cut off to ensure he can never rule again. But the East has changed. This is not the Rome of Tiberius or Marcus Aurelius. This is a Rome that adapts, mutates, and survives through fire. Justinian returns in 705. With Bulgar allies at his side and vengeance burning brighter than ever, he retakes the throne. His face is disfigured, his eyes cold, his rule absolute. He declares himself the Avenger of the Eagle and swears to restore not only the empire's borders but its soul. Meanwhile, the Western Republic flourishes, though not without tension. Without an emperor, power is shared among elected military magistrates, senatorial councils, and local governors. It is chaotic, but it is agile. New laws are passed to formalize provincial autonomy. Trade with the caliphate, though unofficial, is tolerated. Latin culture begins to absorb Islamic influences: architecture, medical texts, mathematics. And then, in 710, an unprecedented move shocks the Christian world. The Western Republic sends a delegation to Damascus. They offer not submission, but negotiation. A treaty of non-aggression, trade rights in North Africa, and recognition of shared interests in suppressing piracy. The Caliphate, pragmatic and still consolidating its new holdings, agrees. In Constantinople, this is seen as treason. To Justinian II, it is the final proof that the West has abandoned Rome, not just politically, but spiritually. He declares the Western Republic apostate and excommunicates its leaders via an emergency synod, but the Pope remains silent. By 715 CE, the world has changed beyond recognition. Two Romes stand, one imperial, one republican. One clings to its past with fire and fury. The other shapes a future with cautious innovation. And between them lies a sea no longer owned by either, but contested by both. By 720 CE, the Roman name still echoes across continents, but it no longer speaks with one voice. It sings in two tongues, moves with two minds, and bleeds on two fronts. In the East, Constantinople, defiant and divine, wages holy war against the Umayyad Caliphate and curses the Western Republic as heretics in Roman disguise. In the West, the Res Publica Occidentalis charts its own path: Latin, decentralized, increasingly secular, and dangerously independent. And in the middle lies the Mediterranean Sea, once a Roman highway, now a crucible of war. Naval supremacy becomes the pivot of history. After the fall of Carthage and the Muslim conquest of the Maghreb, the Caliphate now controls key ports along the African coast: Tangier, Tripoli, and Carthage itself. These cities are transformed into shipyards, manned by Arab engineers and Berber sailors trained by former Roman defectors. The Umayyads understand what Byzantium once did. To rule the sea is to shape the fate of empires. In 722, they launched their most audacious plan yet: the Twin Pincers. From the west, Muslim forces cross the narrow straits into Hispania. They are met not with unified resistance, but political confusion. The Western Republic's decentralized model offers flexibility, but little centralized military coordination. Governors in southern Hispania delay action, hoping to negotiate. But the Muslims move fast. Within months, they take Gades, modern Cadiz, and establish a permanent foothold in the Iberian Peninsula. From the east, a second fleet pushes towards Sicily and southern Italy, long held tenuously by imperial garrisons loyal to Constantinople. The Byzantines, weakened by recent political instability and mutinies in the Anatolian themes, fail to mount an immediate response. Syracuse, the Roman naval hub in the central Mediterranean, falls after a brutal siege. The fleet is scuttled, the city looted. Rome's sea is bleeding. In Constantinople, Emperor Leo III, newly ascended and desperate to preserve the empire, initiates sweeping reforms. He centralizes command under loyal generals, reorganizes the thematic system into tighter military districts, and implements a controversial policy that will define his reign: iconoclasm, the destruction of religious icons, statues, and images deemed idolatrous. To Leo, it is a purification of faith. To many others, especially in Italy, it is sacrilege. The Pope, still walking a precarious tightrope between the two Romes, denounces iconoclasm in 726. The Western Republic seizes the moment. Its magistrates pass the decree of the sacred images, affirming the sanctity of religious art and declaring Constantinople's decrees null within Western borders. Suddenly, the theological dispute becomes a political weapon. Roman loyalty fractures further. Southern Italy, caught between the Eastern emperor's iconoclastic agents and rising Muslim raids, erupts in rebellion. Cities like Naples and Beneventum declare themselves free Latin communes, swearing fealty to neither East nor Caliphate. The Pope, alarmed, begins to act more like a monarch than a bishop, organizing militias, sending envoys to the West, and issuing edicts with increasing political weight. In 730, the unthinkable happens. The Western Republic formally recognizes the independence of the Papal States, offering military support and economic treaties in exchange for the Pope's public acknowledgement of the Republic's sovereignty. The Bishop of Rome, once a unifying symbol, is now a partisan figure, aligned more with the Latin West than the Greek East. Meanwhile, the Muslim foothold in Hispania strengthens. Cordoba becomes a regional capital under Umayyad control. Yet resistance grows, not from the Western Republic's central command, but from local noble families who rally under banners of regional pride and Christian survival. These local militias, proto-Reconquista forces, harry the invaders in the mountains of Cantabria and Asturia, setting the stage for a long and grinding resistance. On the seas, naval warfare enters a new era. Dromons clash with Arab shinnis, fast-sailing ships armed with catapults and fireproof hulls. Greek fire still gives Byzantium an edge, but the Caliphate learns fast. Naval skirmishes in the Aegean become monthly bloodbaths. Trade dwindles. Port cities wither. Famine spreads in parts of Sicily and southern Gaul. And still, the question remains: who owns Rome? The empire in the East insists it does, through law, succession, and divine right. The Republic in the West claims it does, through language, tradition, and the will of its people. And the Caliphate, watching both tear each other apart, doesn't claim Rome at all, but threatens to take everything it once ruled. By 735, the Mediterranean is no longer a Roman lake. It is a battlefield, a wound, and beneath the waves, the legacy of an empire slips further from unity towards something new, something uncertain. By 740 CE, the last great empire of antiquity stands fractured, not in ruins, but in paradox. The Byzantine East, still magnificent in ceremony and unrelenting in war, remains the beating heart of imperial tradition. Its palaces glitter, its walls hold, its legions still march in the name of Christ and Caesar. But the West, once reclaimed by blood and brilliance under Justinian, has slipped away, not to invaders, but to memory. The Res Publica Occidentalis is no longer a rebellious frontier. It has become a force of its own, culturally distinct, militarily competent, and fiercely proud of its Latin heritage. In cities like Massilia, Lutetia, and Caesaraugusta, civic banners fly not with the imperial eagle alone, but with regional sigils, oak leaves, lions, stars, symbols of a new identity rising from Roman soil. But while these banners wave, shadows deepen across the continent. The Umayyad Caliphate now dominates the southern Mediterranean. From Tangier to Alexandria, Islamic rule stretches across a golden crescent of trade, scholarship, and strategic ports. Their victory is not just military, it is ideological. Islamic scholars translate Greek philosophy into Arabic. Roman engineering texts are copied, studied, and improved. The knowledge of the empire, once hoarded in scriptoria and senate halls, begins to migrate south and east. In Hispania, the Umayyad hold Titans. Cordoba becomes not only an administrative center, but a beacon of culture. Mosques rise beside old Roman forums. Aqueducts feed new irrigation systems that transform Andalusia into a breadbasket. Latin-speaking Christians, now called Mozarabs, coexist uneasily under Islamic rule, paying taxes in exchange for protection and the right to worship. Yet resistance does not die. In the rugged highlands of Asturias and Cantabria, Christian warlords form coalitions. They are not republican magistrates nor imperial governors. They are mountain princes and knights, hardened by years of attrition. One of them, a man named Pelayo, launches a series of successful raids in 738. Though small, they become symbols of survival, of memory, of a future where Christian banners may yet fly across Hispania. In Constantinople, Emperor Leo III watches these developments with a mix of disgust and dread. His iconoclasm has sparked bitter resistance across the empire, especially in Italy and Greece, but he refuses to yield. To Leo, the survival of Rome demands purity, discipline, and obedience. Religious imagery, in his eyes, has become idolatry. The West disagrees, violently. In 741, Leo dies, and his son, Constantine V, inherits not just the throne, but the weight of his father's reforms. Constantine is a capable general and ruthless administrator. He expands the tagmata, turning them into a permanent, elite mobile army loyal only to the emperor. He fortifies Thrace, wages war against the Bulgars, and continues his father's religious policies with merciless efficiency. Meanwhile, in the Western Republic, a different evolution unfolds. Rather than consolidate power under a single ruler, the Republic expands its senatorial system. A magister concilii, a rotating head of the Senate, is elected every 5 years, with limited wartime authority. Local councils in Hispania and Gaul maintain independence, but coordinate through common law and language. The system is slow, inefficient, but resilient. In 745, a remarkable event shakes the foundations of this delicate balance. A young scholar from Lutetia, named Marcus Albinus, publishes a treatise titled De Duplici Roma, on the two Romes. In it, he argues that the true essence of Rome lies not in imperial authority, but in civic virtue, republicanism, and the Latin tradition. His work spreads quickly, copied by hand, debated in forums, and even read in monastic circles as far as Ireland. For the first time, a philosophical framework exists to justify permanent Western independence, not as rebellion, but as rebirth. The Eastern Empire responds furiously. Constantine V labels the treatise heretical, orders all copies burned, and places a bounty on Albinus's head. But it is too late. The idea has taken root. While swords clash in Italy and Hispania, the war of ideas rages silently across Europe. In Ravenna, a general named Marcellinus, loyal to the Republic, declares the exarchate dissolved. He expels the last of the eastern garrisons and invites the Pope to preside over a council defining the Western Church as doctrinally separate from Constantinople. Though not yet a formal schism, the division is now more than political. It is spiritual. By 750 CE, the Roman world has become a mirror shattered in half. The East still calls itself the true empire, with its emperors, its court rituals, and its ancient legitimacy. It stands tall, wounded but defiant, guarding Europe's flank from the Islamic world. The West has become something else, a post-Roman society still wrapped in Roman garb, still speaking its tongue, but dreaming of freedom, of a future not dictated by emperors, but by assemblies, councils, and men born of the provinces. And in the deserts and mountains of the Caliphate, scholars record these divisions, map these fractures, and quietly prepare for the next phase. The empire that once ruled the known world now watches its legacy pulled in three directions: one of faith, one of law, one of fire. By 760 CE, Rome is no longer a place. It is a myth shaped by those who invoke it. In the east, Constantinople remains the gleaming bastion of the old empire, a city of domes, mosaics, and mighty walls. Its emperors rule with divine right and iron resolve, defending against Muslim fleets and Slavic incursions alike. Greek is the language of court, theology the weapon of politics. Bureaucracy stretches across Asia Minor like a spider's web, binding peasant and general to a throne that claims descent from Augustus himself. But the eagle's wings are not whole. In the West, the res publica occidentalis thrives, not through imperial might, but through adaptability. It is a world of shifting alliances, vibrant city-states, and local rulers draped in togas as much for tradition as for power. In Lutetia, senatorial orators quote Cicero while discussing tariffs on Mediterranean grain. In Hispania, Roman legal codes are fused with local customs, and governors from old Visigothic families sit beside Latin aristocrats in provincial councils. And rising behind it all is the Catholic Church. Following the Council of Ravenna in 755, the Western Church officially severs doctrinal unity with the East. Icon veneration, Latin liturgy, papal supremacy, these become the pillars of a new religious identity. The Pope, no longer merely Bishop of Rome, is now Patriarch of the West, a title once avoided but now wielded with pride. This religious realignment cements the West's break from Constantinople. It also elevates the Church as the moral heart of Western Roman identity. Emperors may be gone, but God remains, and his vicar now lives on the Tiber. Meanwhile, the Caliphate watches, learns, and expands. The Umayyads, increasingly influenced by Persian administrative models and Roman military organization, control a crescent of land and sea that dwarfs even Justinian's empire at its height. In 762, they found a new capital, Baghdad. Though far from the Western Front, its scholars and strategists understand Rome better than many within Europe do. They translate Roman legal codes, adapt architectural blueprints, and engage in debate over imperial governance. A strange transformation is underway. While the Roman world tears itself apart over what it means to be Roman, the Muslim world internalizes and repurposes that legacy. But the Roman story is not finished. In the East, Emperor Constantine V launches a bold campaign to retake Sicily and restore imperial prestige in the Mediterranean. The campaign is partially successful. Imperial Marines land in Palermo and drive out the Muslim garrisons with a combination of brute force and bribes to disloyal Berber auxiliaries. Greek fire rains across the coastal waters, turning Umayyad ships to ashes. The triumph is short-lived. Sicily becomes a bleeding wound, constantly raided, rarely pacified. The cost of holding it weighs heavily on the imperial treasury. Peasants in Anatolia suffer under tax hikes. Mutinies break out in Cappadocia. And in 766, a devastating earthquake strikes Constantinople itself, damaging aqueducts and cracking the Hagia Sophia. The people whisper, "Is God punishing the empire?" In the West, opportunity stirs. A military genius emerges in northern Gaul, a commander named Lucius Severianus, the son of a Latin senator and a Frankish noblewoman. Charismatic, ruthless, and brilliant, he rallies disparate provincial militias into a unified fighting force. Under his leadership, the Republic pushes back against Muslim forces in southern Hispania and restores Roman control as far south as Cordoba. Severianus returns to Lutetia a hero. Crowds chant his name. The Senate offers him Imperator Populi Occidentalis, commander of the Western people. It is not quite emperor, but it is close. The title sets off alarms in Constantinople. A new Roman warlord? In the West? Under a republican banner, but wielding personal armies? The court fears another Julius Caesar. But the Senate in Lutetia insists Severianus is a servant of the Republic, not its master. Yet behind closed doors, The general moves carefully, organizing new legions, founding military academies, and surrounding himself with loyal governors. The balance of power has shifted. In 770, emissaries from the Caliphate arrive in Lutetia and Constantinople simultaneously. They offer the same proposal to both Romes: peace, trade, and recognition of borders. The Eastern Emperor, weary from endless campaigns and internal dissent, accepts cautiously. The Western Senate, emboldened by Severianus's victories and its new alliance with the papacy, agrees on one condition: that the Caliphate recognize the Res Publica Occidentalis as the legitimate successor to Rome in the West. To the shock of many, perhaps even to Severianus, the Caliphate agrees. For the first time in centuries, three powers now openly shape the post-Roman world. The Eastern Roman Empire, rooted in Constantinople, still clinging to unity through orthodoxy and force. The Western Roman Republic, decentralized, Latin-speaking, ideologically plural, but increasingly military in nature. The Umayyad Caliphate, no longer a foreign force, but a civilization that absorbs the legacy of Rome into something new. The world has moved past Justinian's dream of a single empire. Yet, in a strange way, Rome lives on, not as a nation, but as a language, a law, a memory, fragmented, fought over, reborn again and again, and in the hearts of its children, east, west, and beyond, Rome still whispers. By 780 CE, the ghost of Rome no longer haunts the world. It walks among it, reborn in fractured bodies. In the east, Constantinople stands proud, wounded but unyielding, a bastion of imperial continuity in an age where continuity itself has become a battlefield. The Eastern Roman Empire has survived sieges, plagues, religious revolts, and the loss of much of its Western conquests. Yet still it rules with sacred purpose. The emperor is Basileus ton Romeon, Emperor of the Romans, defender of orthodoxy, and chosen of God. But with every generation, the cracks deepen beneath the polished marble. In the West, the Res Publica Occidentalis matures into something the ancient Senate might not recognize, but would surely admire. It is not a democracy in the modern sense, but a republic forged in compromise. Local autonomy is preserved through provincial councils, but key military and economic decisions are centralized in Lutetia. Roads are patrolled, schools teach in Latin, was uniform. And though the republic has no emperor, it has something dangerously close: Lucius Severianus. Now in his early 40s, the commander who reclaimed southern Hispania has become the most powerful man in Western Europe. Charismatic, austere, and tactically brilliant, he walks a careful line between military strongman and civic servant. He refuses the title of emperor, but only just. He holds imperium militia, supreme military authority ratified by the Senate. His portraits are minted on bronze coins. Children in Hispania and Gaul know his name before they know the Senate's. But Severianus is not a usurper. At least, not yet. He reforms the military, turning scattered militias into organized legions bearing republican standards. He constructs fortified roads along the Pyrenees and establishes a system of watchtowers stretching across southern Hispania to monitor Muslim movement. He founds the Academia Romana Militaris, where Roman tradition is taught alongside tactics drawn from Islamic warfare and Frankish cavalry. Yet power begets fear. Some in the Senate begin to suspect Severianus of harboring imperial ambitions. Others whisper of assassination plots. And Severianus, once a man of the people, begins to surround himself with personal guards and trusted provincial governors, bypassing the more conservative senatorial factions. Meanwhile, the East faces its own reckoning. Emperor Leo IV, known as the Khazar, dies suddenly in 780, leaving the throne to his young son, Constantine VI. Power falls to Empress Irene, a sharp-minded Athenian with an iron will hidden beneath silk veils. She is the first woman to rule the Eastern Empire in her own name. And her rule is not quiet. Irene ends the iconoclasm of previous emperors. She restores images, relics, and the authority of monasteries. Churches erupt in celebration, but not everyone is pleased. The military elite, many of whom rose under iconoclast regimes, view her as a threat. Rebellions break out in Anatolia. Irene responds with force and, in one instance, has a general blinded in public. But her greatest gamble is yet to come. In 782, Irene sends a secret delegation westward, to Lutetia. Her proposal is unprecedented, a diplomatic union between the two Romes. Not a reabsorption, but a confederation. Two courts, one church, shared military coordination against the caliphate. And perhaps one day, marriage. A dynastic bond between East and West. The Western Senate is divided. Some see opportunity, a return to legitimacy, protection, and glory. Others smell a trap, a velvet-gloved attempt to reimpose Eastern domination. Severianus remains silent. For weeks, the city holds its breath. Then, finally, he delivers a speech on the Senate floor. He praises Irene's wisdom, honors her courage, but declines the offer. "We are Rome's legacy. Ni Aris? I see," he says. "Is not its shadow." Instead, he proposes a different path, mutual recognition, not as rivals, nor as vassals, but as siblings, children of the same flame, walking different roads through the dark. In Constantinople, Irene receives the news with a cold smile. She understands the message. There will be no reunion, only balance, but balance is fragile. In 785, the Umayyad Caliphate suffers a civil war. Factional strife tears at its core. A young prince, Abd al-Rahman, flees Damascus and declares himself Emir of Al-Andalus in Cordoba. The caliphate is broken, but the idea lives on. Islam, like Rome, adapts. Abd al-Rahman's new emirate is vibrant, multicultural, and fiercely independent. He signs a truce with the Western Republic, trades scholars and goods, and begins building the Great Mosque of Cordoba, a symbol of permanence. By 790 CE, the post-Roman world stands on a razor's edge. The Eastern Empire has restored religious unity, but at the cost of political fractures. Irene rules with brilliance and fear, but her throne trembles beneath her. The Western Republic has risen from the ashes of conquest, blending Roman order with frontier innovation. But it is held together not by law alone, but by one man. The Islamic world has splintered, but its Western provinces thrive, growing culturally and economically, even as their Eastern cousins war. And so we arrive at the twilight of an era. 3 powers, 3 visions. One born from marble and icons. One born from legions and laws. One born from revelation and learning. The dream of a reunited Roman Empire has faded, but something new stirs beneath its ruins. A tripartite world, unstable yet rich with potential. The next century will not be one of reunion, but of collision. It is the dawn of the 9th century. The year is 800 CE. 3 powers now shape the known world like celestial bodies orbiting a fractured sun, each burning with a different fire, each born of Rome, yet utterly transformed. In the East, Constantinople is entering what many will later call its second golden age. The Macedonian dynasty is not yet in place, but the groundwork is being laid. Under the watchful reign of Empress Irene, and later her court rivals, the Byzantine Empire reclaims its strength, not through reconquest, but through resilience. Its cities are fortified, its courts reformed. The bureaucracy hums with cold efficiency. And yet, it is a kingdom haunted by paradox. For while it proclaims itself the sole heir to Rome, it shares the world stage with a republic that increasingly no longer cares for such claims. In the West, the Res Publica Occidentalis has survived beyond all expectations. It has weathered Muslim incursions, internal schism, senatorial infighting, and the temptations of empire. It stands not as a unified monarchy, but a mosaic, interwoven provinces held together by a common language, legal tradition, and reverence for Roman virtue. Lucius Severianus, now a graying figure with silver at his temples, still commands the loyalty of the legions. But he has not declared himself emperor. Not once. In 798, sensing the tide of history shifting, he does something few in power ever do. He steps down, voluntarily. He returns to his villa in southern Hispania, where he writes his memoir De Republica Nova, reflecting not on conquest, but on endurance. Empire is a sword, but a republic, if nurtured, becomes a shield against the winds of time. His resignation sparks waves of both relief and anxiety. A triumvirate is formed to replace his central authority, 3 elected consulares who rotate power and balance one another. It is a gamble, but one rooted in the Roman memory of shared governance. Meanwhile, the world beyond the 2 Romes shifts rapidly. In Cordoba, Abd al-Rahman's emirate has become the crown of the Western Islamic world. The Great Mosque now rivals the basilicas of Rome in grandeur. Christian and Jewish scholars study alongside Muslims in its libraries. Latin and Arabic are spoken in the markets. It is a city of learning, tolerance, and quiet ambition. And in Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliphate has replaced the Umayyads in the east. The Abbasids look less to conquest and more to consolidation. They invite scholars from across the known world, preserving Roman, Greek, and Persian texts. What the Roman world forgets, the Islamic world remembers. But history is never still. In 800, something extraordinary happens. Pope Leo III, pressured by political unrest in Rome and increasingly alienated from Constantinople after decades of theological and cultural drift, crowns a new protector of the Western Church, not the Senate of Lutetia, not a descendant of Severianus, but a Frankish king, Charles, King of the Franks, later known as Charlemagne. The West gasps. The Sacrum Imperium Romanum, the Holy Roman Empire, has been declared with a Germanic warlord now anointed Emperor of the Romans. It is a title that enrages Constantinople. Empress Irene, still ruling alone, refuses to recognize the coronation. How could a barbarian king wear the purple mantle of Augustus? But it also stuns the Western Republic. The Senate is not consulted. The title bypasses them entirely. Many in Lutetia see it as betrayal, a power grab by the Church, an attempt to forge a new monarchy outside the Republican framework. A rift begins to open, not between East and West, but within the West itself. Some provinces, particularly those closer to the Papal States and the Frankish border, begin to drift toward Charlemagne's orbit. Others double down on the Republican identity. What was once a unified Western Roman Republic begins to fracture, not collapse, but evolve. And in this moment, the great irony of Roman restoration is laid bare. Justinian once dreamed of unifying the empire under law and cross. But now, 250 years later, the very legacy of his reconquest has created not one Rome, but 3. Constantinople, ancient, orthodox, and imperial, clinging to legacy with steel and scripture. Lutetia, vibrant, republican, Latin, evolving into something no emperor could have foreseen. Cordoba, sophisticated, multi-ethnic, and Islamic, building upon Rome's ruins with its own vision of order. 3 suns now light the post-Roman world, and though none can claim sole inheritance of the old empire, all of them burn with pieces of its soul. By 810 CE, the Mediterranean is no longer a Roman lake. It is a crucible of civilizations. Armies still march, treaties are still broken, faiths still clash. But beneath it all, the idea of Rome, of law, of order, of civilization carved into stone and memory, continues to shape every choice. The eagle no longer flies alone, but its shadow covers the world. In this alternate timeline, where Justinian's reconquest truly succeeded and the Byzantine Empire retook the West, the legacy of Rome did not fade. It multiplied. A stronger empire brought unity for a time, but also birthed divergence. The restored Roman West grew into a republic unlike any before. The East held firm with faith and fire, and the Islamic world, once Rome's enemy, became one of its greatest inheritors. So now we ask, would you want to live in that world? A world with 3 Romes, 3 truths, and one endlessly echoing legacy? Or is our real history, messy, broken, but familiar, a better path? Let us know your thoughts. Would a reunited Rome have saved the world, or only delayed its division? Leave a comment below and join the conversation about what might have been.